Hello everyone, my name is Loko and welcome to another Zerg build order. This is going to be a Zerg versus Terran build that is extremely powerful if executed correctly. Now what I mean with correct execution is that you're gonna have to hit every single queen inject, and what I mean with a powerful timing attack is Roaches, Banelings and Zerglings straight in your opponent natural around the 8 to 9-ish minute mark. I don't know the exact timing of it actually, but pretty early on into the game. Now the real strength behind this, while we actually start up our first Overlord right here at 9 supply, the real strength behind this build is that everything looks normal from the Terran point of view. And with normal I mean, you know, 4 queens out, we're gonna start third base around the normal timing, we're gonna start double gas around the normal timing as well. So everything that we're gonna make looks very normal from the Terran point of view, but then we switch up a couple of the gas timings and all of a sudden we will be able to crank out a lot of units. Now this is especially very powerful once you get towards Gold League and up. If you're below that, you know, you can still obviously try and execute this, but it's gonna be specifically powerful if your opponent actually has a good idea of how Zerg works. Because, you know, they're going to be scouting, they're going to try and figure out what exactly is going on. Now, on top of that, one thing that we also need to do is actually scout ourselves. And with the scouting, we're going to try and figure out whether or not we are safe to actually go for this timing attack by analyzing the situation. But I'll go over that in a second. The first thing we want to do right here is put down a hatchery on the low ground at 15 supply right here. So standard expansion timing. Now, the way we know whether or not things are normal is by figuring out whether or not my opponent went for a quick natural or whether or not he went for like a quick third command center even. But let's say my opponent actually is gonna like go for an aggressive push himself. This may get a little bit difficult to execute. So we are gonna do a little bit of scouting while I threw down my spawning pool right there at 15 supply as well. And afterwards, I'm gonna follow it up with an Overlord at 17. Now, the real strength, once again, is that it comes down to a super normal looking Zerg build. So, you know, it's gonna be very important that you're actually gonna, you know, look normal. You don't want to seem very, like, you know, like you're hiding something. If the Terran player notices that, for example, you have like a bunch of queens sitting on the ramp early on for no apparent reason at all, they're likely gonna get a little bit suspicious. So you want to just play normal and not be, you know, super hiding, because else they're gonna make a bunch of bunkers, and this push is likely not gonna work. Now, we are gonna get a third base up, like I already mentioned. However, very important to note is that we're not gonna use that third base for mining. We are simply gonna use it for some larva, as well as a potential for transitioning. After the spawning pool finishes, you want to start your queens up right there as soon as you possibly can, and you want to start a set of Zerglings as well that you're basically going to use to figure out what is going on. Now, in this specific game, I'm not actually playing first an opponent, but normally those Zerglings would be looking whether or not there is a natural up, whether or not we can maybe even see a bunker go down, things like that. Ideally, we would start 4 queens at once, but obviously, since we are playing Zerg, we can't do that. But the idea is that you get them out as quickly as you possibly can. So, you know, I am going to queue up my first one right there as well, or my third one rather. Gonna inject with the first one, walk it to the natural for defensive purposes to deny any kind of scouting, and obviously to ward away anything else. And there we go. Also gonna start my 4th queen up right away. And, you know, I'm going to use that queen as well for defensive purposes. Next up, I'm going to start another Overlord. Now, ideally, you would start your double gas geysers at the 5-minute mark, which is when you hit 36 supply. So here we go. Gonna be starting up my gases right there in the natural. The reason for the natural is because I already have full saturation in the main base, and it's just a little bit easier, so I don't need to mess with it. Now, normally, you'd be looking around with the Zerglings to see what is going on. Making more and more drones for the time being right here. And I'm also going to start spreading a little bit of creep. Just, you know, to make things look normal once again. Hitting another queen inject right there with the new queens that spawned. And putting drones into the gas geysers as soon as I can. Next up, we want to get a natural, or a third base up rather, sorry. That is at the 6-minute mark. So usually right around 5.5 to 6 minutes is when a Zerg player takes the third base. Well, I'm going to do exactly that in this game. Once again, not going to use it for droning up, but hey, we're just playing it like it is a normal game. Now, things are going to change up a little bit once we hit 100 gas. So I'm going to start Zergling speed right here first, which is not that surprising. And on top of that, I'm also going to be starting a Roach Warren. Now, once I hit full saturation in natural, which is going to happen in a second, once my Overlord actually finishes up. There we go. I am going to stop droning up completely. I am going to stop making units right now, and instead I'm going to start making 1 Baneling nest and a bunch of Overlords. So right now is where the scary part happens, okay? A Terran can be roaming on a map right now with a bunch of Hellions, and we just need to be safe. Now, for the time being, I'm making a couple of Overlords in advance because I want to have at least like 70 supply free or like up to 70 supply free, so I can actually go ahead and use the Overlords that I get to make more and more Roaches. Now, I'm not spending anything right now. I'm just saving up. I'm just waiting for my Roach 1 to finish up. Now, if a Terran player scouts this third base, he will likely think that everything looks normal, right? It looks pretty normal as well. But right now, I'm going to start cranking out a lot of Roaches. And once I run out of gas, I'm going to only start reinforcing with Zerglings right now. Obviously, do have to make a bunch of Overlords, and I'm gonna start injecting for this base as well. But, you know, I'm just starting to make non-stop units right now. Once these Queen Inject pop off as well, making a big round of Zerglings. There we go. Making sure, obviously, that once again my Queen Injects are hit, and I'm gonna instantly move across the map. You need to make sure that you don't wait too long. If you wait too long, obviously, the Terran player has more time to prepare, and you want to try and hit as early as possible, while, you know, just reinforcing with more and more Zerglings. Now, the first Zerglings that get across the map, you want to morph those into Banelings, and, you know, don't be afraid to actually morph in a bunch more. And there we go. I'm just making more and more units, while hitting all of my Queen Injects, while actually likely making one Overlord too little right there. But, you know, just reinforcing with more and more stuff, and I'm gonna try and bust straight towards the natural with Roaches, with Zerglings, and with Banelings. So all in all, this build is relatively easy to execute, but there's one important thing to keep in mind. Once again, you need to practice this. You need to make sure that you hit every single Queen Injects, because if you don't, you're gonna end up with a much weaker timing attack, and it's just not gonna be even remotely as powerful. So I would highly recommend you open up a custom game, go into the game, and just practice this a bunch of times without actually playing versus an opponent like I am doing right now. Just try this a bunch of times and see how things are going, okay? Just try it out. And get to the point where you feel comfortable enough to actually do this while scouting out your opponent, while maybe even positioning your Overlords a little bit better, and while trying to figure out exactly what the Terran player is up to, and then decide whether or not you can actually go for this build. Now, as always, I will also provide an actual written version of this build order right below that like button in the description below, so you can check it out as well right there if you would like to. Other than that, I would highly recommend you give this build a try because it's a lot of fun, and more often than not, you can go ahead and win the game right here. Now, also, one last thing to note is that let's say things aren't going very well, and I'm noticing right here that my timing attack isn't going as well. I accidentally blow up all my Banelings right there. Oh no, so what am I gonna do? Well, one thing you can do from here on out is actually start droning up the third base. You can start the double evolution chambers as a transition as well, and you can go up to a lair, and, you know, just go for a normal game. Now, the third base is obviously going to be great because you can still establish that big economy. But one important thing to keep in mind, though, is that you are going to be slightly behind in upgrades and all that if your opponent was playing a standard game. I want to thank you guys all for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!